Okay, want to welcome everybody to our special threat education series here on the REvil Ransomware attack against Kaseya. As people are joining here, let me know if you can hear me, and hopefully you can see the slide. If you can't, please say something in the chat there. But we do have a couple of presenters here for you today. On the screen here, you can see Dustin Childs and Tim Miller. Dustin's having some technical challenges, so I apologize for that. So we may have Myla Pilao talk, who's our director of Trend Micro Research. And then we also have Tim Miller, who's our product operations manager for XDR. So from our research group with Myla, she's going to be talking about the REvil group itself, what the Kaseya attack is and means. And then Tim is going to talk about the telemetry, the threat vector, the IOCs, those types of things in some more detail. During this, feel free to ask questions in the Q&A in the chat. Please utilize that. We do have people monitoring those. We'll try to get to your questions, as best we can. Maybe even answer some of them live. Also, if you do have a question, and you would like somebody to reach out to you about that, and you don't necessarily want to put in the chat, feel free to send your question to just the panelists, and we'll have somebody reach back out to you after the session to follow up on that. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Myla, unless anybody's got some immediate questions here. No? Okay, I think we're good. Let me stop sharing my slide, and thank you everybody for joining. Appreciate it. And I will send it over to Myla.
Thank you. Just getting my slides ready. I hope you guys hear me fine. Okay, this is live, so we'll do what we can to share with you what's happening in this space. Okay, first, thank you so much for joining our second series of this threat series. I know if there is one area that's been hugging the headline for the past couple of days is really the Kaseya ransomware attack. So we want to take this opportunity, and we promise you to answer two things. One is this a new attack? Is it something I need to be worried about? And then, of course, we wanted to help you understand also what can you do? What are practical steps we could do so that we prevent these attacks in the future? So before we do that, I am pretty sure you've seen pretty much the news about Kaseya. They always say that it's such a bad timing, but in an attacker point of view, we have to understand that this is what they call the perfect storm. Just before the holiday kicks in, they will drop this big thing. So this is usual that we see as a trajectory of a lot of these threat actors. But let us step back. What we know about Kaseya is that it is one of the emergent type of attack that really depletes the use or the trust on IT platform and software that you and I in the enterprise business or small businesses use a lot. And true enough, in the Kaseya ransomware attack, we've seen that they highly compromise the VSA tool that is being used in this platform. So we know that fact already. The second portion is maybe what we have to understand also is that, is this something new? So let me walk you through a little bit 3 years before this. 3 years ago, we made what we call a bold statement that the potential attack vector would likely be utilizing legitimate platform or legitimate IT tool systems that are commonly used. And this is where we are today. We are now seeing the emergence of attacks on these critical platforms that are very, very susceptible. The other one that we made a bold statement on 3 years ago is that they will now use what we call business process compromise attack, meaning to say that this are attacking not just a certain platform, but attackers will carefully review our business processes, and they will weave their attack carefully into this system. What do I mean by this? This is what we call BPC, is a high degree of discreteness that attackers are now using to carry out their attack using both traditional malware or more complex malware. But the most important point is that it will be very, very difficult to spot. Why? is because they are actually using, again, tools that are commonly used from our everyday network traffic, from our everyday administrative processes. So this is now a combination, again, of what I meant by using a business process attack and using, again, compromising legitimate tools such as what we've seen in Kaseya. So the question is, this is not new, but it is emerging because of those two combination. As a result, when we saw the first report in July 2, it is really leveraging what we call their multi-service provider platform. We all know that this platform is responsible for a lot of administrative things like building new credentials, looking into what areas they need to patch, etc. So it is really very key in a lot of their processes. So when we take a look at it also, the second question I always get asked is, it is not as wide range as when we were talking about, for example, dark side, which is just last week, right? The reason for such is, again, the niche of this system is used on MSP. It's not widely distributed on an end user platform. So it's not good, it's not bad, but the point is, this is a well-trusted system used by a lot of MSP. So, which means that it is a necessary tool for their own monitoring as well. So that's why it's not wide range. What we also need to note is that the actual attack is a typical ransomware attack, right? So it is not, they're using an exploit into the tools, that is the Kaseya one, but they're dropping actually a traditional ransomware note, which is essentially what we call the REvil note. So let's go a little bit in terms of understanding this particular REvil gang. Again, most of the time what we get is, who are the people behind this particular attack? The biggest misconception is they're new, but actually they're not. The threat actor is called REvil Gang, is not a new gang. They are the same operators that we have spotted in the research community since 2019. They were spotted in April of 2019, but they were the gang behind what we call Grand Crab and Sedinokubi. The two these are the two famous ransomware families. The common denominator of this ransomware families is that they are both very popular and, sadly, a little bit successful in penetrating exploit vulnerabilities. That's how they have mastered it. That is the reason that they are behind this. The other interesting fact about the threat actor is that their techniques is what we call double extortion. We have seen that there are many types of ransomware. The double extortion is what this threat actor has been focusing on. Let me deal a little bit closely with what double extortion is. The first area that they do is what we call a dedicated ransomware node. Essentially, what we've seen in REvil Gang is they were able to compromise an exploit, drop the ransom node in it. That's the first, what we call the first attack on extortion. The second, the reason that we name it double extortion is, the question is, what will they do with the stolen information, with the stolen data? And this is exactly what we're now seeing, that a number of those information are being used to trade in the underground community. The second one that highly likely they will do is what we call the auction, meaning to say that they will sell it for future campaigns and future attack. So that's why we call it a double extortion. So, and this is where this group has been really, really good at in the past. So again, to answer the question, it is nothing. It is not a new group. They have mutated over a period of time. So one thing that we have to note as well is that this is also the group is behind, sadly, one also of about 2 months ago, the JBS attack, right, which is a meat processor, a huge company. So you can see here that when you think, when you try to carry the mindset of a threat actor, they would really, really target different types of critical organization. But the ultimate fundamental type of attack that they would only focus on is really ransomware. But the vector point can come in many different factors. So let's talk a little bit about what exactly is the vector point? What did they use to be able to get into the system? Okay.
Hey, Myla.
Yes.
Hi, this is Dustin. I'm here.
Perfect, Dustin. So before we would like to probably cue in you to Dustin, who is obviously the master in charge of all of this. Will give us a little bit more understanding of what exactly is the vulnerability. Take it over, Dustin. I can use your slides, or you can do the sharing from your end. Either way works.
The slides are fine.
Yeah. Okay.
So first of all, let me apologize for being a little behind. My wife had a medical emergency this morning, and I just got here as fast as I could and managed to avoid all police entanglements along the way. Audis are quick. I like them. A little bit about me, just so you know where I'm coming from. My role is let's see if I can start my video. I am the communications manager for the Zero Day Initiative. And the Zero Day Initiative is the world's largest vendor agnostic bug bounty program here at Trend Micro. And what we do is we purchase software reports of bugs from independent researchers throughout the internet, throughout the world, really. And they take that information and turn those into pre-release filters for tipping points. And then we work with the vendors to get them patched. Hopefully you're familiar with the ZDI program. We're responsible for a whole lot of bugs getting fixed. And that's kind of where my role is now. Prior to this, I used to work at Microsoft. I was part of the Microsoft Security Response Center. We were the ones responsible for Patch Tuesday. So there's a pretty good chance I've rebooted your computer at some point, sending out a patch. Apologies for that. It wasn't my fault, I promise. But that also gives me kind of a unique insight because I've been on the receiving end of ZDI reports, and now I'm on the sending end of ZDI reports. So it's a nice view of seeing a bug go from being reported to us through patching through the vendor to release. And it gives us a lot of insight, especially on things like Print Nightmare. We can see a lot of in between the lines of what's going on with that. And we can talk about that a little bit. I know we're going to focus on particularly print spooler bugs here at a future webinar. So hopefully I'll be back for that shortly. Prior to that, I was in the US Air Force. I was in the late 90s. I was trained to catch hackers. So I've been at this for a while. And that's back prior to YouTube, prior to Google, prior to a whole lot of things. And most people just had AOL. So yeah, I come with cobwebs intact, so it's all good. So let's talk a little bit more about the Kaseya, because there's a lot of, one of the things that I've noticed about this is there's a lot of misinformation that is circulating about the, about what actually happened and what it really means for customers and enterprises in particular. So looking at the first bullet point here, 0 days are being used in ransomware attacks. Let's kind of level set on what a 0 day means too. A 0 day is something that is unknown to the vendor, meaning that they've had 0 days to respond to it. Now I talk to a lot of customers and they say, you know what, 0 day exploits are too rare and they're too expensive. I just don't care about them. To which I respond, 0 day exploits are pretty rare and they definitely can be very expensive. For example, there's a company called Zerodium that is offering millions of dollars, literally, for Android and iPhone zero-click attacks. Those are fully fledged attacks, and what then they do, they're exploit brokers, so they would resell those to governments and other entities. However, 0 day vulnerabilities are incredibly common. And if you don't believe me, just go to our website, zerodayinitiative.com, click advisories and click on upcoming, and you'll see over 500 bugs that we have purchased or found and reported to vendors that are in 0 day state right now, meaning the vendor has not produced a patch, but there are 0 day vulnerabilities. Once a patch is released, we call that end day because it's been n number of days since a patch is available. End day vulnerabilities are incredibly common. So 0 day vulnerabilities are incredibly common, 0 day exploits uncommon, but 0 day vulnerabilities become end day exploits. Finding bugs is very hard unless it's the second Tuesday of every month. And then Microsoft and Adobe tell you where 100 different bugs are. So then people reverse engineer those and those come through. It was said that 0 day exploits were used in this ransomware attack. And that is true. It was an unpatched exploit that was used. However, the vendor did know about it. So the vendor knows about it, but they don't have a patch. Is it a 0 day? Well, it's a 0 day to the customer, that's for sure. So that's all that matters. But the exploit that was used here is a really common exploit, and it should have been found through an internal audit and could have easily been detected. So yes, it's true that it was a 0-day, but not a very expensive 0-day, and not anything that we haven't seen before. The other big misconception is that there are people who are saying this is a nation state sponsored attack. And a lot of this comes from a New York Times article that was reporting on potentially state sponsored attacks targeting US, the RNC, the Republican National Committee, or other active political things. And they kind of did the evil Knievel jump into conclusion on that one that, well, this ransomware gang has been linked to Russia, and this other story is linked to Russia, therefore these are linked. And that's nothing but speculation, and there's absolutely no indication that these attacks are state-sponsored. And the third one is that these are apex predator super hackers. And if you could go ahead and click that. The actual truth is that the bug here that was used, there's a couple, there's an authentication bypass, and there's a command injection bug. And that SQL injection bug is so common that it's unlikely, if it had been presented to ZDI, that we would purchase it. We buy a lot of bugs. We buy a lot of bugs at a lot of different vendors. So we buy Microsoft bugs, Apple bugs, Google bugs, IBM bugs, Cisco bugs, etc. If someone had approached us and said, hey, I have this SQL injection bug in Kaseya, we probably would have said, no, I'm sorry, we don't want to buy that. We don't buy command injection bugs that often. We don't buy cross-site scripting bugs. We don't buy a lot of denial of service bugs because, quite frankly, we already have filters to prevent those things. Generic filters are good enough, so we don't need to buy those. So to say that these are apex predator super hackers is definitely a misnomer. These folks know what they're doing. However, they're by far, in a way, not the most complex attacks that we have ever seen. So if we could go on. So, oh yes, what is a 0-day? I kind of covered this already. And that QR code there takes us to, sorry, if you could back up one. Yeah, that takes us to our blog. I just kind of want to plug our blog for a little bit. We do a lot of blogging. I'll publish a blog here this afternoon covering a recently patched bug in SharePoint. I also do a patch blog every month talking about the latest Microsoft and Adobe patches. Hopefully y'all take a look at that. But yeah, so that's what we're talking about there. So what is the real thing that we need to take away from this? This was a supply chain attack, sort of. And here's where I want to clarify on that. The attackers in this case did use Kaseya functionality to take control of downstream customers, and they leveraged a central management service through a managed service provider. That is kind of the supply chain. However, this is different than SolarWinds. So SolarWinds, it kind of piggybacked onto SolarWinds to make it into an enterprise. In this case, they took advantage of something that was already in an enterprise used to supply downstream either MSPs or customers, and kind of piggybacked on it that way. So it is a supply chain attack, but not kind of in the way that we think of normally for supply chain attacks. This is also not the first time this has happened. And the QR code here actually goes back to coverage talking about a talk given 9 years ago at a conference in Australia or New Zealand. I can't remember if KiwiCon takes place. It takes place in the Southern Hemisphere in one of those two places, surrounded by hobbits. So these talks, as far as what you could do with Kaseya in particular, as well as other MSP tools, go back over 9 years. So there's some prior history to this. And Kaseya itself has been used to propagate malware in the past. So this isn't the first time this has happened, and this is not necessarily a new class of attack. It is certainly the most damaging attack using this. The third thing I want to point out is this highlights how a very simple bug can still cause a tremendous amount of damage. Just because I said we probably wouldn't buy a bug doesn't mean that it's not worth exploiting. In this case, you had an authorization bypass, command injection used in Kaseya, and it's caused who knows how much dollars worth of damage. That's another interesting thing here, because so many of the Kaseya products are used by small and medium-sized businesses. We probably will never know the full extent of damage. I mean, if I'm a dentist office, and I've got 20 PCs that are managed by an MSP and I'm taking over, I'm probably not reporting that out. I'm probably just keeping that to myself as much as I can. But anyway, so let's go on. So what to do if you're impacted? First of all, Kaseya has released a tool to help detect anything. The QR code goes to that. You're not expected to memorize the URL. The other things are just some kind of common sense things. And the first is multi-factor authentication. And I know we beat this drum a lot, but we beat the drum because it's a good drum solo, and we like that. On wherever you can enable MFA, especially for customer-facing services, definitely put that in. The second thing is implement an allow list. If you've got something that, if you've got a device, a system that's going to push out updates to everything else, that probably should only be accessible from a very specific group of IP addresses. At the very minimum, you can kind of restrict it that way. And further, you can restrict access to resources. So anything that you want to, that you can put behind a VPN or firewall or on a dedicated administrative network, isolate that as much as possible. Obviously, for an MSP tool like this, you can't air gap it the way you would for ICS or SCADA systems, but whatever isolation that you can provide that system is only going to benefit you. So there is that. So let's go ahead and move on to the next slide. So how can we stop this sort of thing from happening again? The first, and I cannot stress this most, is audit everything often. Now, a lot of folks who use this type of thing have absolutely no capabilities to audit this. So going back to that dentist thing, that dentist is not going to take a look and go, oh, well, Kaseya, you should really run this audit and do these things. But what you can do is you can demand your software vendors like, hey, when's the last time you audited this? What organization audited it? Was it, was it a real firm? Was it Trend Microservices that did this, or one of our, legitimate competitors, or was it Bob's House of Red Teaming? Because Bob's House of Red Teaming is out there, and they're producing certificates saying, yeah, we audited it. But trust me, Bob may be your uncle, but you don't need that. Regular audits, secure coding practices definitely go a long way. And the thing is, software has bugs, it always will. But through regular audits and through secure coding practices, we can lessen the impact and the severity of those bugs. And that's our end goal. The other big thing we can do is we can look at our threat model and say, what happens if this is used against us? We have a lot of threat models for external threats. What is our threat modeling for insider threats? And essentially an MSP is an insider threat to your enterprise. That doesn't mean you shouldn't use them, of course. I mean, they're very valuable. But you have to consider what happens if your management tools and your other toolings are turned against you. You have to include that in your threat model. One of the really interesting things to me, kind of going back to who is doing this, the REvil group, or REvil, however you pronounce it, is they really have evolved over the years, and ransomware has evolved over the years too. One of the things that's interesting about this group is that they exfiltrate literally terabytes of data as much as they can, because they don't want to just encrypt your data and restrict access to it, because people kind of caught on to that and they started getting good backups so they could just recover. But they went above and beyond that. They're like, okay, not only can you not get access to your data, we are going to expose access to your data if you don't pay up. So not only have this group in particular targeted the meat packing, as well as getting into some Apple stuff, seeing their products, they had Lady Gaga's emails. They had Donald Trump's emails. They were threatening to release like 1.6 gig of Madonna's emails. I'm not sure what state secrets Madonna has, but I don't know. Maybe, the communications between Lady Gaga and Madonna somehow were going to create chaos. But they go after whatever data they can get their hands on and expose it whenever possible. The other thing we can do is hold vendors accountable. And in this case, I'm not talking about because there are people who've talked about legislation or liability. I'm talking nothing more than voting with your wallet. Letting vendors know that their investment into security will equate to sales is a great way of having vendors actually implement stuff. So that's one way. Everybody responds to that. So yeah, definitely hold vendors accountable. So we do have a few indicators of compromise. That QR code leads to our full page of everything, the file hashes and everything else. I don't want to put a bunch of file hashes up here. It doesn't make very pretty slides. But definitely They used a PowerShell script to encrypt and terminate processes. We detect it as these. Trend Micro detects it as these particular things. And it's definitely something that you should look for on your enterprise. Go ahead, go to the next one. Oh, that's it. But I do see a question for us. And I think we have enough time to answer it. And if not, I'll pretend we do and answer it anyway. The question is, why does Trend Micro ZDI purchase bugs? What do we do with them? And does purchasing them take them off the market? Those are excellent questions, and I'm super glad to get it. So the overall reason why we purchase bugs is to increase our threat intelligence. So zero-day initiative researchers, we find a lot of our own bugs, especially in ZDI. We are finding and reporting our own bugs. But we decided to offer a vendor-agnostic bug bounty program to enhance our threat intelligence because 3,000 security researchers around the world are better than the 20 researchers I have on payroll when we all put our heads together. So really, that's the core reason why we're doing it, is we're doing it to get the latest threats and techniques and exploits. We're getting them first. We want to do that. And what we do with those bugs is first we hand them off to our digital vaccine team, and they build filters wherever possible to push out to tipping point. So tipping point customers, excuse me, get filters to protect themselves from these bugs. At this point, up to, I think the average is 87 days ahead of the vendor security patch. And that's if the vendor patches at all. So that's one thing we do with them, is we get the pre-release filters out there. And then we report the bugs to the vendors. We report to Microsoft, to Apple, to Adobe. We're one of the top 5 reporters to Microsoft. We are the top reporter to Adobe. We're the top reporter to ICS Cert for SCADA bugs. We're one of the top for Cisco as well. So we work with these vendors to actually get patches made available. And does purchasing them take them off the market? In a way, yes. I mean, because we are working with the vendors to get patches and defenses out there available to everyone, not just Trend Micro customers. That is effectively taking that bug off of the illegitimate market, off the exploit broker market, all of the criminal marketplace. And yeah, so that's kind of the goal. And again, zerodayinitiative.com is our website. We've got a lot of information about that out there. And if not, hit me up with more questions and I'll be happy to talk for a long time about the ZDI. And with that, I'll turn it over to Myla to see if there's any other questions.
No, I think we're good. Thanks, Dustin. So I think we'll carry on and we'll have Tim to walk us through on how we will see this, or how we're seeing this actually, let's say in a network perspective. Tim, take it over, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Great stuff from everybody. I appreciate everybody taking the time today. Give me a quick second here and I will share my screen. Actually, I need permission to share my screen if someone could allow that. Thank you. All right. So hopefully everybody can see my screen. First, I just wanted to start off on, this is the Trend website for REvil. Everybody has access to this, is publicly facing. You can see we're updating things as we get details on them. This goes over a lot of what was already discussed this morning and then some. But we also have some indicators in here that we can use when doing our hunting and sweeping within our environment. So today I'm going to be doing a lot of work from within our Vision 1 console, which is our XDR environment. XDR, for those that are may not be aware, is extended detection and response. So not just endpoint detection and response, but across network, email, etc. So first thing I want to do is I'm going to grab this SHA value from the website here, and we can take that into our Vision 1 console. When we're inside the Vision 1 console here, this is the dashboard. It's just kind of give you a heads up view of what's happening in your environment. You can see on the 6th, we had some critical events. On the 7th, we had a couple mediums and several lows. But I'm going to go into the search first part here first, and so I can do a hunt. So if you didn't already get an indication that you had this in your environment from any product that you're using, and you wanted to do a sweep, we can come in here and do a hunt or a sweep of the environment to see if there's indicators. Right, we're using these IOCs that are publicly available, see if there's anything within the environment. So it's going to go out and take a look at all the data that we're sending up from the telemetry to the data lake. And then once those information comes back, we can use that to identify what sources may already have this available on it. So and here you see there's quite a bit of data, and to hunt through all this might take a little while. So let's try and narrow it down a little bit. So if I come into the endpoint host name, it's going to reach out and see how many endpoints this has affected. So apparently there's 16 instances of this hash value, SHA value on this one endpoint. Let me see if I can filter it down a little bit more based on the risk. So now I come down here, it's pulling the data based on the risk assessment of those items. And you see I've got 3 mediums and 1 critical and 12 lows are informational. So I'm more worried and interested on the critical. So I'm going to add this filter. So I can come in real quick and just narrow it down to get that one instance. When I open this up, I can see here again, that's critical telemetry file was created. I can see the hash values that are there. I can see that it's the object is the msmpeng.exe. So this is Microsoft's Defender, right? I can see where the path is for it. I can see what else is related to it. So I could start my hunt or my search here. I can obviously see also that I've got the REvil agent available on my desktop in a folder called bad folder, right? I can see what process signer that was. And so I can really use this to start my search and to start my attack investigation. So say we didn't have any IOCs yet, but we knew there was something going on out there. We can take a look and see if maybe there is some observed attack techniques that we're picking up on. So when I come down in here, I'm only looking for criticals. I'm going to change this back to the last 7 days because it definitely didn't happen 10 minutes ago. And then go ahead and hit apply. So again, this is searching the data lake for any criticals that happened over the last 7 days. And when I look in here, I can see this is that same desktop endpoint that we were looking at before. I can see that it is classified as Kaseya ransomware file, right? And I can expand this and go in a little bit further detail. So here I see there's 3 critical hits that are affected. I can see the MITRE tactics and techniques associated with that. I also have 4 medium risks, right? So the execution of a file from an uncommon file path or folder. And I can come down in here and I can see objects that are highlighted here for me to take a look at. Again, we see this msmpeng again. If I scroll down, I can see the REvil agent, a process command. I can see it again here for the path. If I right click on this, I get a couple of options. I can add it to an exception file. I can copy it to the clipboard to do research on it. I can also check an execution profile based off of this. And that takes me into the execution profile of this event, right? So on the left-hand side, I can see again, we identified this as a Kaseya ransomware file. And for all trend customers that are using endpoint products, if you're using our behavioral monitoring and or our predictive machine learning on your endpoints, you were protected against this from day one. I did see a question come in about that. Actually, our agents were able to protect against this before it even happened. We have since obviously released a signature for that, so we're picking it off immediately based off of that. So it's a lot much quicker, more efficient path now. If I click on the agent here, this agent here is the actual REvil ransomware file, right? And I can see what the hash value is associated with it. That's what we just searched on. I can also see what events are associated with it. So if I click on the created events, I can see here that this mpsvc.dll, which we have identified now is a side loading DLL onto the Microsoft Defender. We can see that it is listed here. It does not have a signer, right? So we know that it's most likely not a good file, right? Most good software has a signer, as we see here through Microsoft Corporation has signed their version, right? So this is our ability to identify this attack. So we didn't get any alerts, right? We didn't get anything. We just started with a hunt and we found this information. Now I'm going to take a step back and actually show how we can identify this quickly within your environment by taking a look at the workbenches. So a workbench was created for this incident, right? I didn't show it from the beginning because I wanted to show you how you could hunt and investigate in your environment first. And what I see here in this investigation is that there is an early indicator of the REvil ransomware via Kaseya VSA, the VSA agent on an endpoint. If I click on this workbench, it'll bring me into a graphical representation of the event that we saw, right? We can see the MITRE technique that was used. We can see the object file path. Again, we can see that it resided on the desktop. The agent was installed on the desktop. If I want to get more information on this endpoint, I can view the detailed profiles of it, so I can get its IP and MAC address, etc. I can also identify the user that's logged in here. Okay. I can also do isolation of this endpoint so that it can't allow anything to be spread any further. I can do a search based off of this endpoint to see if there's anything more. It's just as I can do a search based off of this MSMPENG or the agent.exe. And I can also go in and view the execution profile, which we already saw. If I go back real quick into the workbenches at the beginning where I started, I can take a look. There's also an incident, associated incident ID here. This allows us to pull a correlation of incidents that happened around that same time frame or to that same endpoint or same user, so we can see if there's more going on than just one item, right? So like if I take a look, we have the indication here of the REvil, right? We also have this cybercrime malware one that I can take a look at and get more information on. Then come in here, it doesn't show a whole lot, but we see this agent again, and with a bracket 1 around it. So that tells me that this agent has been attempted to be executed multiple times on this endpoint. So this time I want to take a look at the execution profile of this one, and we see there's a lot more data. So you can see the agent has been launched twice in here. We can also see further details on what it's launching each time it tries, right? So we're activating SVC host here. You can see there's a lot of indicators or attack techniques that have been identified with this event that are showing up here. And again, you can see based on the color, the risk level here, mediums and highs. But these are all correlated together automatically so that you can identify items quickly without having to hunt through your SIM or through your logs to try and identify and piece things together, right? So we're putting that together for you. I heard some things coming in to see. Is there any questions inside the chat? Looks like they're getting taken care of pretty quickly there. All right.
No, I was going to say the only question that came up was about isolating an endpoint. So I was just getting ready to answer that. But if you want to answer it live, you can do that.
Sure. So let me go back to the screen here and right-clicking and isolation of the endpoint. So to isolate an endpoint, basically what we're doing is we're telling the agent when it checks in that we want to isolate the network communication to everything except for the management console of Vision 1 and the agent management console. So if in this case Apex 1 was being used, our endpoint protection agent, they would isolate that agent from that endpoint from being able to communicate to anything except for the Apex 1 manager and the Vision 1 console. So you could then go in and do further research. It would also, again, obviously stop it from moving laterally across your environment and infecting more endpoints. One of the tricky things behind this attack was we know it was choreographed. They specifically looked to launch it at a specific time. It's 1430 UTC. They or 1630, excuse me. They did that on purpose so that when it was identified, it would have hit automatically everybody really fast. And there wouldn't have been a lot of recourse for shutting it down, right? We saw 1,500 companies in the US affected, and they put a $70 million ransom on that attack. So they were calculated, they knew what they wanted to hit and when they wanted to hit it. And I think part of the reason why it hit when it did was because of the acknowledgement of the vulnerability and the patch that was forthcoming being sent out on the 2nd, right? So there's a lot of things at play there. Obviously, there's a lot of speculation. We don't know for sure, but we do know that they were definitely targeting and going after specific things. And while this was a quasi supply chain attack, the effectiveness of it was huge, because any endpoint that had that agent on it and they could get to the server, they could just hit them all automatically, and it would look like a legitimate process because of the way it was deployed. Obviously, it was caught by trend agents, but some agents were not so lucky. We do know that it also shut down the Defender agent before it started its execution and before it did its side loading. It specifically targeted Defender. We don't have any signs of it targeting any other products at this time. Okay.
Okay, thanks, Tim. I know we're running a little bit over time, so probably can wrap things up here. Appreciate everybody's time here. Let me share my screen. So do want to thank everybody for joining today. If you have any questions, like I said, please put them in the Q&A or within the chat. If we weren't able to answer them, we'll certainly get back to you as quickly as we can. Do want to remind people, there's a QR code up here as well. Recording of this session will be posted on trendmicro.com/breach detection. We will also be having a future event. The next one we are planning on having here in the next week or so will be on vulnerabilities, and we will be talking about the printer nightmare. I know a couple of people are asking if we're going to do something on that. We will. Also, if you have any questions, you can reach out to any of our presenters directly. Do have all the emails on the screen as well. Feel free to reach out to anybody you'd like to. And again, really appreciate everyone's time today, and look forward to seeing everybody in the future. Thank you so much.